Hi, I'm Lars. I'm an only child of boomers who did not save for retirement, and now they can no longer sustain the life that they've lived for 50 plus years and are now being forced to move in with me across the country.
My parents are immigrants from Mexico, and they have not exactly saved for retirement, or at least not in the traditional American way.
Parents don't have anything saved for retirement, and for various reasons, that I experienced growing up, my husband and I are not okay with them living with us in the future.
Why is it your job to take care of them?
Are your parents nearing retirement age? Did you know that the median retirement savings for those aged 55 to 64 is only $185,000? If your parents are thinking about retiring soon, you might want to sit down and have a candid conversation with them about what they expect their retirement to look like and whether or not they are prepared. Maybe they want to downsize their home, move closer to their adult children and grandbabies, or maybe they just assume that they will be able to move in with you. Humans are living longer, requiring more care at the end of our life, which can rack up astronomical bills. And it seems as though less and less Americans are prepared to deal with these harsh realities. So you may want to get ahead of it by asking your parents these 5 crucial questions. This is Rich Girl's Guide, where we demystify the world of personal finance to help you create a financially successful and fulfilling life. I'm your host, Kirby Delicano, and I worked in wealth management for over 6 years before leaving the office to focus on my business and my family. Let's jump right in with question number 1. What do they envision their retirement to look like? Maybe they are planning on traveling the world or selling their home, or maybe they're assuming you or a sibling will be taking care of them at some point. This is a great icebreaking question for a few different reasons. You are going to get a lot of information about their expectations that may be news to you, and this will give you a jumping off point to ask some more personal questions throughout the conversation. I would also pay close attention to the way that they answer the question. If they are smiling ear to ear and can't stop yapping, you know that they are looking forward to this time in their life, and your conversation will go a bit more smoothly. However, if they seem irritated or don't have a clear sense of what they want to do with all of this new free time, they most likely have some anxiety surrounding retirement. This could be due to an infinite number of reasons. They could be nervous about money. They maybe don't enjoy big life transitions. They could be invested in their work. There are literally millions of reasons for them to be anxious. Depending on your relationship with your parents, you can either dive right in with asking them to explain their insecurities, or you can just let them know that you are ready to listen whenever they are ready to talk. As a side note, I would highly recommend taking notes or asking them if it's okay for you to record the conversation so that everyone has something to refer back to instead of hashing out the same details over and over. Question number 2. What are your expectations of me in retirement? A lot of times, parents will assume that their children already know what they want from them, while the children haven't the faintest clue. Some parents may assume they're going to move in with a child and rely on them for day-to-day tasks, while others are fiercely independent and might even refuse to leave their home without a fight. This is especially important for those of you that have siblings. Are your parents expecting one child to be the main caretaker? Is this going to cause any resentment amongst the siblings? If you have a spouse, this is even more important so that the two of you are on the same page when it comes to helping out a parent in retirement. One important thing to note here, we all have vastly different relationships with our parents. And by asking this question, I do not want you to think that you are allowing them to tell you what to do. You are simply opening up a line of communication and asking them what they expect you to do. What you choose to do with that information is completely up to you. By openly talking about their wants in retirement and having multiple conversations over time, you can help manage expectations and hopefully come to an amicable agreement that works for both parties. On the flip side, if you keep pushing off the conversation until retirement day comes around and Mommy Dearest is standing on your front porch with all of her belongings expecting to be welcomed with open arms, you might find yourself in a bit of a pickle. A 5, a 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, THANKU. So much for listening to today's episode. Cringe, I know. Don't care. This is a completely self-funded passion project of mine, and in order to continue making more content, I would absolutely love if you would pop on over to my YouTube channel, Rich Girls Guide Podcast with Kirby, linked below for your convenience, and hit that subscribe button. Every follow helps, and the best part is that it is completely free. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. Question 3. Do they have enough retirement savings and income sources to cover their annual expenses in retirement? Guys, I know this is a very loaded question, but it is an extremely important one. If you are not the kind of family that is comfortable coming right out and asking them point blank, there are some sneaky little ways that you can ask them without really asking them. Some examples: how is your annual retirement budget looking? Have you sat down and gone through your expenses in retirement? Do you need any help looking at your income versus expenses once you stop working? An easier way to get to the bottom of this question is to ask whether or not they have a financial advisor. If they do, great. You can offer to tag along to their next meeting and pop in for a few minutes to make sure their advisor has run a retirement plan for them. Any advisor worth their salt will have run some kind of retirement plan or even a financial plan, which essentially maps out their income versus expenses, which will include all their retirement and investment accounts, Social Security, pension, etc., from now until death. If they have run the numbers and they are on track to meet their goals and they are actually sticking to their planned annual expenses, then you can sleep like a baby that night. If, on the other hand, their plan is not looking so hot, they have not run a retirement plan, or they don't even have a financial advisor, you are going to need to do some work. I'll link episode 8, How Much Do You Need to Retire, right here, which is basically a detailed guide on how to calculate your retirement needs and how much you need to save to achieve those needs. Depending on how their savings and income stacks up to their expenses, you might need to have some heart-to-heart conversations with your parents about what is attainable for them. Now, I know these conversations are hard. There is a reason why we don't talk about these topics all day, every day. It's not an easy subject, and there's usually a lot of emotion surrounding this big life transition. But by having these conversations earlier and at least opening up the line of communication, the easier it will be to catch mistakes and get your parents back on track before it's too late. All right, moving on to question 4. If they are retiring prior to age 65, do they have a plan for health insurance? According to CBS News, 7 out of 10 retirees stopped working before age 65, whether that was by choice or not. The tricky thing about retiring before age 65 is that unless a parent is covered by their spouse's health insurance, they will have to go get private health insurance, which can be absurdly expensive. The older you are, the more expensive health insurance is, and when your employer is not subsidizing your monthly premiums, many older Americans find themselves paying anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 annually on their health insurance. And that's not even including deductibles or out-of-pocket expenses. Now, once they actually reach age 65, they will be covered by Medicare, aka government health insurance. But many people fail to plan for the gap in coverage prior to reaching age 65. Now, I have found that this specific question can bring about a lot of emotions. Worry over the large expense and anxiety about declining health being the main two. Depending on how your conversation is going up to this point, if there's already high emotion going on, you may want to table this question for a later date. On the flip side, if your parents are planning to work until 65 or later, you may just want to throw in a little joyful comment like, well, that answered my next question about health insurance. Looks like we can cross that one off. Anytime you can sandwich in praise or encouragement and in general just make them feel good about their decisions, the better the conversation will go. You are essentially kind of summarizing their entire life choices throughout this conversation. So keeping things positive, or at least throwing in positive remarks when you can, will go a long way. All right, we are on the final question. Question 5. Do you have your will, executor, and beneficiaries in place? If so, awesome. The next step here would be to make sure the executor knows that they have been named as executor. We'll get to that in a second. And that multiple people know where to access these documents when the time comes. If your parents do not have these things in place, not to worry. These are things that can be done fairly quickly. Most financial institutions will actually allow you to update beneficiaries on your retirement accounts and investment accounts online yourself. Or you will just need to fill out a form with the beneficiary's information, and then your parents will just have to sign it. As for the will, unless you have a complicated situation, there's really no reason that you can't use a simple free template from Google. Fill in all the information, print it out, and your parents can sign it. You really don't need to get an estate lawyer involved and spend a lot of money drafting your will unless you know it is going to be complicated and there are a lot of moving pieces. For most of us, myself included, a free online template will absolutely do the trick. Okay, so bringing the conversation back around to executors. An executor is essentially a person that is specifically named in the will to follow through on the deceased person's wishes as they stated in the will. What this means in today's world is that the executor has a lot of administrative tasks to handle, such as filling out and signing paperwork, paying bills and taxes on behalf of the decedent, coordinating with the bank and possibly the financial institutions holding accounts, coordinating with real estate agents if property has to be sold, and of course, keeping the family members and beneficiaries updated on the progress. Being an executor is no joke. There is a lot of responsibility and effort involved with the role. And some people will actually set aside a certain amount of money in the will for the executor as a thank you for taking on the role. Something important to note is that just because you name an executor in your will does not mean that they have to take the job. There are named executors who will decide not to take on the role, which is why I highly recommend talking with your family so situations like that can be avoided ahead of time. This can also cause tension between siblings if one sibling is named as an executor and the rest were blindsided because their parents never mentioned anything to them. Having everyone on the same page ahead of time can save a lot of headaches later on. I will say, based on experience in the finance industry, I have seen a handful of cases where one or two siblings were incredibly irresponsible with money and they were not named as executors for that very valid reason. And the parents decided not to tell them ahead of time so that they wouldn't be harassed by those children. And in those cases, I actually did agree with their decision not to tell those specific family members. Obviously, there are going to be one-offs like that where it might make sense to keep a certain family member out of the loop. But I think most of us know whether or not our family falls into that camp, and you can adjust accordingly. Again, talking with your parents and just keeping that open line of communication is going to go a long way, especially when it comes to the family dynamics. Finally, depending on your relationship with your parents, you may want to suggest opening a joint account that has you and at least one other parent listed as owners. And this would be like a joint bank account. Even if they are of sound mind right now, at some point, they may want you to help with paying the bills on their behalf, and having a shared bank account that has yourself listed as a co-owner ahead of time will make that exponentially easier down the line. Okay, I am dying to know. Are you actually going to sit down and have a conversation with your parents? Is this something that you've already done? Are there any questions that you think I missed? Let me know in the comments. I am really curious to see how many people have already broached this subject. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I will have a brand new episode out on Monday, and until then, have a wonderful week. Later, Rich Girls.